Well, morning, church. We're going to spend 5 minutes with God together today. Um, and so today, as we jump in, I want to share a story. Recently, I was honored to officiate a wedding for a young couple in our church. And one thing that every couple does is they choose a passage of scripture to be a part of their wedding ceremony. And this not only makes the day more special and unique for them, but it also reminds everyone attending the wedding that this is not just about a commitment between two people, but this is a covenant before God. That a wedding is a worship service honoring God for what He's done in the lives of each individual and glorifying Him for what He's going to do in the couple's lives as they move ahead. And so we choose to mark those days with passages of Scripture. And this couple chose a passage of Scripture for their wedding day from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Which is not overly surprising. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is one of the most popular passages of Scripture for a wedding. What makes me kind of sad sometimes, though, is that 1 Corinthians 13 has become so common and so familiar at weddings that people tend to think they know it, and they don't take the time to truly take in 1 Corinthians 13. You know, this guy Paul wrote this letter to the church, and he comes up with this beautiful language, but we've just heard it so many times it almost washes over us like a wave, and we don't let it soak into our soul. I feel very strongly about this because it also happens to be one of my favorite passages of Scripture, and so I just want everybody to dig deep into this 1 Corinthians 13, and I feel like every time that I read it, a new idea comes to life for me, that something else is sparked, and I find new truth in its words. And so as I was putting together the wedding ceremony, I was going over the final verses from the chapter, and I got to this part, and I know it well, but in it, Paul is reminding us that so much of this life is temporary. So much of this life fades away, that as we grow and as we mature, that even as we still live full lives, we still struggle to comprehend the fullness of God. But then Paul shifts gears in the final sentence as he's reminding us of the temporary nature of life and things that'll fade away. He says at the end of it all, when everything else is faded, there's three things that are going to remain: faith, hope, and love. And I just started thinking that at the end of our lives, you know, so much of how we've lived our own personal lives, it doesn't make the highlight reel. You know, it doesn't make the best moments. It's not what we get remembered for, but there's certain things about our lives that allow us to leave a legacy for the next generations. The things that mark us, the things that make our character, the things that people reflect on who we were as people and say, this is what mattered to them. And it comes down to these three things: faith, hope, and love. So the questions are, what did you put your faith in through your life? Where did you find your hope? And how did you do at loving yourself and loving others? Because those three things are going to be remembered. And then Paul said something interesting as he says these are the three things that remain. He says, but one of them is kind of above the other two. He says the greatest of these is love. Because faith can be tricky. You might go through seasons where doubt and questions come in, or trials and temptations, they steer you off the course of your faith. Or you may find some times where you're on the top of a mountain, but then other times you find yourself down in the valley, struggling to find the hope in the midst of the weight of whatever life is throwing at you. And those times are a natural part of life. You know, those times when our faith struggles, or those times when hope seems far away. Everybody has those experiences or those seasons. But the one thing we can all do during those times is not to forget about love. That no matter what, faith, hope, and love are going to mark our life. And the one we cannot neglect above anything else is love. Paul says the greatest of these is love. I have a piece of artwork in my home office that says, to know and love ourselves and others well is the most difficult and meaningful work that we'll ever do. To know and love ourselves and others well is the most difficult and meaningful work we'll ever do. And I have that hanging on the wall in my office because I want that to be a reminder of what my priorities need to be each and every day. That I need to focus on loving myself and loving others, because at the end of the day, faith, hope, and love are going to mark my life. But the greatest of these is love. So I hope your day today is filled with faith, filled with hope, and above all else, filled with love. Go out there and love yourself, and while you're at it, share some love with someone who needs it today. God bless you, church. I cannot wait to see you this weekend.